and I'll talk a bit about the kind of activities that we've been doing as part of that. But alongside that, it's been a significant year of change. But first of all, I'd like to thank a few people during this first year for me as Managing Director of England's Economic Heartland. I'd like to thank the board, and particularly the board chairman, Cllr Wenham, for their leadership, ambition and commitment to England's Economic Heartland. In my first year, I've really welcomed your guidance and advice that we as EEH benefit from so much. Thank you. Secondly, I'd really like to thank our accountable body, Buckinghamshire Council, under the leadership of Councillor Tett, for hosting us and particularly for looking after us as part of your own. It's really very much appreciated by all the staff. Thirdly, the brilliant EEH team. We're growing in number. We're all here today. Please go and find them, challenge them, ask them, tell them what we can do more for you. And finally, to absolutely everybody here. We're all part of the solution that we're looking at today, and hopefully as I go through my slides, you'll see why it's so important that we understand more about what we can do to really unlock some of the challenges that we have. So back to my reflections. For EEH, this year has been a twofold sort of year. Building a stronger and stronger evidence base that Councillor Wenham has talked about to inform prioritisation and to make the case for investment for you all to use. And secondly, to advocate the investment in some of the key schemes that are vital to the success of this region. But this was against a very complex environment at national government level. New policy landscapes evolved, and as you can see on my slide, this feels like a long time ago when I say it, the Transport Decarbonisation Plan was published, which set a very clear steer on DfT's focus on planning for net zero through the transition to alternative fuels, a real opportunity but also a challenge. As Councillor Wenham discussed, the implications of Bus Back Better, the policy framework and funding that came from the Bus Back Better approach, which caused very significant challenges to many of our authorities, challenges that we are still grappling with. And finally, the government's Levelling Up White Paper, published this year, gave us as a region additional need for advocacy and for progressing the reason for our schemes to be really, the relevance of our schemes to the national framework. It's certain we are in a more constrained fiscal environment. What that means for us is that we need to focus on what really matters, managing the crippling effect of inflation and working with all of our local authorities to look at how we can do that and work with the Department for Transport to understand quite how challenging that can be when we're delivering these major schemes. Making us know that we need to do things well and for less. How can we work together to streamline processes, to take away the challenges, and to deliver things better? But we also know that this is a really significant region for supporting the UK economy as a whole. We are part of the solution, as Councillor Wenham set out. The region is an economic powerhouse, and following on from Councillor Wenham's slides, that what this shows is how significant transport connectivity is to unlocking the economic opportunity of the region. Through the past year, EEH has gathered more and more evidence from businesses on why improved connectivity across the region, not least in schemes like East West Rail, are critical to our success. This is an economic story, connecting people to jobs and skills, allowing businesses to locate across the region, creating wide economic clusters that make the most of our region's assets, including, as Councillor Wenham said, our fantastic universities. But it's an economic story, and it's so much more than just the economy. Over 10% of our region is designated areas of outstanding national beauty. The Chilterns alone compromises 6% of the region's total area of AONB. The region has a really valuable historic environment, a wealth of historic assets, including Blenheim Palace, Bletchley Park, and our natural and built environment is a major attractor to people and businesses. Its preservation is a really important priority for local leaders and local communities. Biodiversity net gain is an expectation of leaders in this region, and we've seen that in some of the work that's been done. In the case of, for example, the A14 scheme, which was delivered by National Highways recently, the scheme achieved 11.5% biodiversity net gain, and East West Rail is set to go similar or further than this. And we're right to expect infrastructure providers, new businesses in the region, to respect and enhance our local environment. To achieve all of this is a complex system of solutions, complex set of relationships, solutions and delivery chains. The STB is here to simplify those chains, to strengthen the partnerships and to find a way to do things better, to focus minds in government so that we can secure the funding we need to deliver what is necessary to achieve these outcomes. Everybody has an important role to play in this. As we look at the challenge and opportunities of planning a transport system for the future that can deliver net zero, preserve and enhance the region's natural environment and support economic growth, we know there are things we need to do better. The EEH transport strategy, published in February 2021, still stands true. In that, we set out a 5-point action plan, working towards net zero by harnessing innovation and supporting solutions which create green economic opportunities, supporting the delivery of key public transport schemes as the catalyst to transform the region's public transport network, championing increased investment in first last mile solutions to improve local connectivity and broaden access to the region's transport system, supporting the strategic road and rail network to function efficiently while minimising the impact on local communities, and finally promoting investment in digital infrastructure as a means for improving connectivity and reducing the need to travel. So just picking up a few bits and pieces on each of those themes. Planning for net zero is a major challenge. Carbon emissions from transport in this region are 10% above the national average. And in many of our local authority areas, it's largely not in our gift to control it. On the slide, you can see carbon emissions for 2 of our local authority areas. Northamptonshire I've grouped together for both West or North Northamptonshire and Hertfordshire there. And the largest chunk, the green area, shows what proportion of carbon emissions comes from through traffic. Transport carbon emissions from through traffic. So in Northamptonshire, 59% of emissions from transport are from traffic that don't start or finish in the Northamptonshire area. And for Hertfordshire, it's slightly lower, but still significant. The other side is based on, it shows journeys that do either start, finish, or are internal to those areas. And they are the types of journeys that we do have more control over and can do more. The government plans that about 80% of net zero emissions from transport can be achieved through the transition to alternative fuels. That is a seismic shift. At the moment in Bedford, we've done some work on forecast EV uptake, and today you will hear more about it. At the moment in Bedford, there's just over 3,000 EVs within the borough of Bedford. By 2040, the projection is there will be up to 100,000. That is based on the data that we've got and the need for us to really respond to that level of EV infrastructure. It's a huge challenge, not just for supply chain, but also working across the different the energy sector to make sure that we've got the electricity in place to respond to that. That data is growing for all of our local authorities, and we will be continuing to share that, particularly with our board in December. Alongside that, there is still so much emphasis on local transport solutions. We await the government's LTP guidance and really continue to press on your behalf for the need for that to be thorough, clear and realistic about what the government needs to do to help you respond to the decarbonisation challenge that you have in your local areas. The second area of a key priority for us is supporting delivery of those public transport streams that are absolutely fundamental to allowing us to achieve a transformative transport system in this region. Delivery of East West Rail in full, including the Aylesbury link, is a very significant part of connections for us, and we continue to advocate on your behalf, and particularly working with the East West Mainline Partnership under the chairmanship of Councillor Steve Broadbent to ensure that government understand the very significant role that scheme has to play in connecting our region. But alongside that, there are other schemes. The Hertfordshire Rapid Transit, which Councillor Wenham talked about. Strategic bus and coach journeys, like the Luton to Dunstable busway, where 20% of journeys between Luton and Dunstable are done by bus. That is compared to a national average of 4%. We've got to learn from that. We've got to look at why bus is successful in that region and how we can learn from that and transfer those lessons to other parts of our region. But also making the most of existing connections on our railway lines and bus and coach routes that are already in place. How can we use those to the best of our ability? But the station, bus, rail, is not the end of a journey. And for people to have choice, they need to know they can get to their destination easily, safely, and reliably. This is an area, I would argue, of greatest challenge. Piecemeal funding in local transport, no long-term certainty of where the funding has come from, and the increase in real pressures on our partners in local government is all making this very, very hard to deliver. And yet, the solutions are so critical to giving people the choice in the way that they travel. I would argue that the private sector has a really key role to play in this. There is a lot of solutions that you will hear about later today of innovation, of new ideas. And for us as the STB, it's how we can bring those ideas together and help look at the funding regimes that are needed to scale those ideas up into a realistic and viable alternative transport solution. We are working and addressing the issues where we identify them. I saw the active travel champion, Chris Boardman, last week, and he committed to me that they are reviewing elements of LTN 120, which I know is a really big issue for many, many of our local authorities, to make it fit for purpose for all communities, particularly those in rural areas. We also need to be really authentic about the very real and important role that roads play in our region. We need to see the highway network as a tool to manage and future-proof, as Councillor Wenham said. I'm really proud that this year EEH has set a new way of working with national highways. Instead of working on the conventional approach that national highways take, we insisted that they took a levels of service approach where we worked with them to define what mattered for us on our national highway, on our national and regional major road network. And we identified a suite of levels of service, 10 as are shown on my slide, which we determined were the things that mattered most based on the transport strategy and what national highways were working on. Through those levels of service, we've been working on the Oxford to Cambridge Road Study, which has been sponsored by the Department for Transport and delivered by National Highways. And through that study, based on those levels of service, we're seeing some really significant issues on some parts of our road network in Aylesbury, M1 Junction 13, in parts of the A1 and many others as well. I think, as Councillor Wenham said, but roads need to be planned for the future, and looking at how we can plan a road network that is digital ready, can make the most of the asset that we've got, is a really important part of this. And again, that innovation piece is really important that we bring it in. And I would be doing an injustice if I didn't mention rail freight. 60% of goods moved by rail freight in the UK travel through our region, and yet we have some very significant blockages, not least Ely. On behalf of partners in the room, England's Economic Heartland has been campaigning and working with government to help them understand how significant it is that we need the investment in Ely Junction to ensure that the freight movements by rail that can be made are made on that right route of journey. And finally, underpinning all of this, as I said, is digital connectivity. A future-ready road network, the ability for people to use technology to make decisions, and how we can support that. We recently, in the last year, have secured funding through Buckinghamshire LEP to put digital fibre all the way along East West Rail to Bletchley, so that is digital fibre ready, it's digital ready, it's connected and ready to go. That principle of putting that fibre in at the point of construction is absolutely vital and a real success for us. So we very much want to continue to build on that approach. So hopefully, as I've cantered through the activities that we've been under, you leave feeling like there is a complex set of solutions. I think that we need clarity of funding so that decisions can be made around the way that we manage this region on a realistic and agreed understanding of on the funding that is available. Secondly, we need flexibility of funding so that we can remove modal-specific pots. We're not chasing the prize, we're dealing with the solution that we think is right for that area. We do need a focus on EV infrastructure. We need to start scaling up and being able to address the challenges of responding to the level of infrastructure that is needed to rise to the government's challenge around alternative fuels, not just for car traffic, but my goodness, for freight, it's a challenge. Finally, we do need to put public transport first. We need to ensure that investment is made as soon as possible in those schemes, those transformative schemes that will give people choice in the way that they travel around our region. We need to allow greater opportunities for new mobility and innovation to come forward, and we need to support our local authorities. We absolutely need to be able to allow them to set the right ambition with the confidence that they have the right resources and support to control the delivery that they want to achieve. So on that basis, I have placed those 6 areas on a Slido and ask you to choose which of those 2 you think are most important for us to address as we go forward through our work. I appreciate they're all important, but it makes it more fun to ask people to sort of prioritise what's important to them at this current moment in time. So I will leave that with you, and I think the idea is that we will analyse some of those responses as we go through our discussion. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Do you want to come and join us here? Thanks. Thank you very much. Yeah, so if you go to the polls section of the Slido app, where, by the way, thank you very much, as many of you have been putting some questions in there. If you go to the poll section, those 6, they are there. Those 6 are all out there, and they should be populating now. So if you can go, while we're talking, populate those, and then we'll come back to those a little bit later on. Thank you very much. Some really great work and some really interesting activities that have been going on there, Naomi. Just a few questions from me. I mean, public cash, as you both pointed out, is in short supply, and there's some big decisions going to be taken tomorrow. How does the Heartland, I suppose, remain relevant? And how does it continue to deliver value?
So, I mean, it's clearly on our minds, I think, of most people in the room, is what's going to come tomorrow, and then beyond that, as the Chancellor's announcements get divvied up amongst the various government departments. And I think, no, we mustn't lose sight that even though these are straitened economic times, that this region is one of the key areas that can help lift the country from its current issues. And so making the case to government that that limited pot of investment should be focused in the EEH area is vitally important, and that we keep pushing those critical projects that we've talked about, both myself and Naomi. So things such as East-West Rail, such as Ely Junction, the A428 extensions, those tools that will enable and maximise the productivity of all those really globally significant businesses that we have in our region. So I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing is looking for maximising the availability of funding that we have locally as well. So how can we deliver that more efficiently with admittedly limited local authority pots of money to ensure that those projects are coordinated across local authority borders. And then lastly, this is an area of very significant growth in terms of housing and businesses. So developers need to play their full part in contributing to the construction of that infrastructure as well. So, I am looking forward to what Michael Gove might have in store for us in terms of a revised housing bill and developer contributions to help minimise the damage that is done to the environment by infrastructure, but also to maximise our investment in infrastructure in these straitened times.
Okay, well, Naomi, just build on that. I mean, how and maybe reflect on some of the answers that are coming through here. I mean, how do you see the Heartland best adding value?
So in the summer, the economist Zanny Minton-Bellows was on Radio 4 talking, and she was asked about what the single thing that she would do to help the UK economy to thrive, and her answer was to unlock the triangle that is Oxford, Cambridge and London. We're reflecting the whole of the EEH area. For me, that really spoke for itself about the significance of our region. How do we get there? I think there are 2 things. One is, as Councillor Wenham said, there are some schemes across the whole region that are just really necessary. And we know that by investing in them, the government does get a return on their investment. It is the right region to do that. Alongside that, I think what we need to do as a region, a partnership, is give government the assurance that we've got the right skills to actually deliver. So if they provide funding to us, we will deliver. And for me, one of those things is actually by giving us certainty of funding so that we can plan to have the right resources in place so that we can deliver. The minute that funding is piecemeal, it becomes much harder to plan and to put the right people in place to get these things delivered quickly.
Well, just building on that before I take some of these questions, I mean, we're going to hear today about some major investment projects. You mentioned, Councillor Wenham, you've mentioned some of the major investments. But I suppose there's also an awful lot of smaller things that need to happen, things that require perhaps more thinking, more coordination, more collaboration. I mean, how do you see that? Do you think that what's more important to you? Is it about getting the big money, or is it about having that, in terms of what you're doing here, is it about advocating for the big money, or is it about that bringing everyone together to do those small, very important things?
So it's actually both, which I suppose is the easy answer. But EEH is here to help make the case on behalf of all our local authorities for those really big projects, but at all levels. So whether it's rail, it's road, or it's things like the Varsity Way. But also to work with individual local authorities who have their own local transport budgets. And it's not EEH's job to get involved in how local authorities choose to spend their own money. But I think there is a role, particularly through the delivery centre initiative that the DFT has kindly funded for us to look at, so that we can ensure that best practice between individual local authorities is shared, and that particularly where there might be a cross-local authority project, that we may be able to help in a role in delivery. So EEH is not here to supplant, absolutely not here to supplant what local authorities do excellently in their own areas, but there is an opportunity to maximise the effectiveness of that funding by enabling the sharing of best practice and improving delivery.
Okay. So there's loads of questions coming. I'm just going to start picking some of those off. You talked, Richard, about evidence-based being really important. There's a question, if the Heartland advocates for new projects, how can you be sure the evidence base is unbiased?
Well, I'm going to let Naomi answer that, because she is the keeper of the evidence base.
Gosh, that is a very good question. So at the sort of surface level, the data that we use is often national data sets or collated through nationally approved processes. I think there is naturally, therefore, a level of control in there. However, one of the biggest issues with transport planning is